Hi guys, I'm here today to do a video that I should certainly have done sooner, which is something I will be talking about during the video. I want to preface this video with saying that I do not think I'll be able to articulate myself perfectly by any means, and I am more than willing for people to call me out in the comments on any mistakes I make, anything that anyone finds triggering or offensive, because I really want to be able to articulate my feelings as clearly as possible. But obviously these conversations are very difficult, and I think we all know a big reason, the leading reason why white people don't speak enough about issues of social justice as pertains to white supremacy and racism is because they're difficult conversations and we feel awkward, hence the delay and hence the sort of somewhat garbled messages that can come from white people during times such as these. So like I said, I'm more than willing for people to give me their thoughts down below. Let me know if anything I say in this video is, delivered in the wrong way, because I really don't want the outcome of this to be offence to anybody. But I know that I am not, perfect, and I'm sure I will make mistakes, but please hold me to them and call me out on them. So I'm of course here because in the past week and a half following the brutal murder of George Floyd, we've seen wide-scale protests, rightly so, in the US and across the world, and the response to those protests in the US has been abhorrent. These people are there to serve and protect, and we've seen time and time again that does not seem to be the case, or at least it does not seem to be the case if you are not white. And I guess I want to firstly talk about why I think, I've taken too long to have this discussion about this specific, most recent time period, but also why, this is a hard conversation to have, but why I think we need to move past that. So I think that, I'm sure that what I say now is, I hope you will take on board that at no point am I saying that I think I'm, a great sort of progressive person who is doing really well and sort of patting myself on the back, because that isn't the case at all. But I think there's so many facets to this, and one is that the fear of using a platform like this platform I have to speak when I am a white voice, and the fear that by speaking I am somehow putting more weight on a voice that we have heard so much over the years and we probably don't need to hear any more of, about a topic that I can never begin to fully understand. As much as I might want to learn, I will never be able to fully know what it's like to walk in the shoes of a person of colour, particularly at times like this in countries like the US. And so there's the fear that by using this platform I take away from the voices you should be listening to. There's also the flip of that if I don't speak at all when I have this platform, I have you guys who watch and listen and who take on board recommendations of books and sometimes other general things that I chat about. And if I don't use it now, then what is it worth? What is the point in any of this? And it's, it's easy for me to think, well, I do read books that talk about these issues and I review them on the channel, but I don't read enough of them. I don't talk about them enough. I don't do, videos specifically focused on social justice themes, which is something I could use this platform for. And so much of that is the fear of errors, the fear of talking about something which is not in my remit, which I'm privileged enough to never have to have lived through, and to be this random white woman who's saying, guys, this is what you should think about these books that do with this social injustice. And so that has affected the type of videos I always do on these sorts of issues, but it also affects, the time it takes me to react to these sort of conversations as they happen. So those are the two sides of the coin, right? And the other is that there's not a third side to the coin, but this is just an asterisk here, is the fear that by speaking, it's somehow virtue signalling. Like, what is the intent behind me having this conversation? Because if the intent is to let you guys know that I'm, you know, a good white person who thinks racism is awful, then is it really worth me saying? Because who is that actually helping? And I fear that when things like this happen, there's a response for a period of time where everybody talks and lots of people say lots of things about what they're doing to try and be better. And then that dies away and we stop talking about it and we move on to the next thing. And I don't want a lot of the conversation has been that, which I completely agree with, that people of colour don't get to walk away. They don't get to not have this conversation. They have this conversation every day. They live this every day. And it's really convenient for white people to suddenly stand up and say, I stand with this movement. I don't believe in racism. I'm anti-racist. When actually, historically, when convenient, we haven't really used our voice how we should. By we, I'm always including myself in this. So I said this video was going to be really garbled, and I apologise because I'm sure it is. So I guess that is why I have been fearful of speaking, because I am hoping that my intention comes across as not trying to detract from voices of colour, because I would wholeheartedly ask you to just click away from this video and go and find voices of colour to listen to, because I mean, I don't even think I need to explain why. I hope I don't have to explain why. And secondly, I hope that, you know, this doesn't come across as me trying to prove what a good person I am, because, you know, I think lots of people right now are asking, how can I be an ally to people of colour? And I saw a really great post on Gisela Buchanan's Instagram, which I'll link down below, which is on that topic. And a lot of the things I've just discussed, she articulated just exactly what I was conflicted about, and I think that's probably how lots of white people feel right now. And I think I would highly advise that you go look at that post and others like it, because I think actually a lot of allyship is obviously having these conversations on any level you can. Obviously some of you won't have platforms like this that I do in order to have those conversations, so you can have them with friends and family and colleagues. But I think also a really big thing is that you don't just, and I include myself in this as well, just have these conversations but then not really do anything in your personal life to back it up. And I don't really want to say to you, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm going to do, because I think that is just me saying, you know, well done me. But I think what I'd like to say right now is that there has never been so, you know, and whether, obviously, as I've said, all these responses, as a person of colour, I would be so filled with rage thinking, why has all this happened now? There's been all these people brutally attacked and murdered for years previous. There's been a bit of response but nothing like this, and why now, and I would 100% think that. But what has come out of this, of people reacting, is the resources are literally at your fingertips. So I'm not going to link many resources down below really, because I feel like right now the absolute minimum any of us can do is just spend a tiny amount of time online, literally like 10 minutes, because the resources are insane. The resources for recommendations of books, of films, of documentaries, of places you can go donate to, of places you can volunteer, what you can do locally in your country, wherever you live in the world, who you can write to politically, whether that be locally or you know, however your governmental system works, centrally, to use your voice. There's all these options, and I think that we should right now as individuals be taking the responsibility to look into that ourselves, because there's so many resources out there right now to do that. And another thing I think that this has really made me think about is I've seen so many amazing lists of books that are being recommended for people to read, predominantly non-fiction books about racism in the US and the criminal justice system and the horrific inequalities of the criminal justice system in the US, but also I've seen some recommendations of novels, and interspersed with some of those recommendations I have seen recommendations for books about racism in the UK. Predominantly they've been non-fiction books focused on racism in the US, and you know, that is what I've read from predominantly. So actually I've seen a lot of books on those lists that I think are absolutely fantastic, and I would love to reread myself, and look forward to hearing more people talk about them, and hopefully then, you know, the more people talk about these ones, the more we'll then start talking about other ones that perhaps aren't as well known. A fear that I have right now, and I've seen a lot of people voice this, is that it's very easy to say, yeah, this is awful, but it only really happens in the US, like nowhere else is as bad as this, so I'll donate a bit of money, I'll read a book or two, and then, you know, I'm not an American, so there's not much I can really do about it from over here. And actually that's a complete cop-out, because racism exists all over the world. You know, you only have to look at the history of the British Empire to see the awful things we did all over the world, continue to do. You know, the white people in the US who decided that slavery was a good idea originally came from the UK, and whilst that was happening in the US, us white people in the UK were saying, well yeah, we will bring some slaves here, but also we're just going to colonise the Caribbean and we're going to make them slaves in their own home. So we wouldn't, by no means innocent or you know, not comparable to the US, we just did it slightly differently, but just as horrifically. And you know, that's just one type of colonisation we've done, like there's fucking plenty. And I think that what I would ask of this is that these lists of books are absolutely excellent, but I don't want you to look at these lists that are dominated by books about racism in the US and think, oh, that means it's not happening in my country, because I can absolutely guarantee you that it is, and that we haven't been taught about it in school. And that's the devastating thing. At the heart of every social justice issue, I think, what it comes down to is education. Nearly every single social justice issue, if you have to take it down to one core thing that could make a difference, it would be education. And if across the world, globally, our education systems were changed so that we didn't learn the predominant narrative of the people in power, the people who had the money, the people who cared the least, usually white people, then we would all understand, relate and care so much more, because we wouldn't be able to say, well, I didn't know about that, so it couldn't have been happening. And so I think that's one of the biggest things we can all do with our brains and with our voice right now, is we can read books about all different parts of the world, the history of white supremacy, racism and colonialism in those countries, but we can also ensure that we demand in our own countries that the education system is changed so that we learn about minorities, about oppression in our own country. And like, you know, in the UK, we spend a lot of time on the world wars. I'm not saying they're not important, but we don't really talk about any of the awful things we did during that period of time. And we spend a lot of time learning about the Tudors, the names of lots of kings and queens. And I think at one point in history, I studied what happened in the American West for like a year, but yet my remembrance of that is like drawing diagrams of a buffalo as to what bits of the buffalo we use for like what bits of that, I'm pretty sure we called them Indians when I was learning history at school, but Native Americans' clothes. We didn't learn anything about any of the horrific things that were done to Native Americans in the US at the time. So yeah, I hope I've made some form of sense, but I think what I'm asking is that we, you know, myself included, take responsibility for looking into what we can do ourselves, that we take this forward and this doesn't just last for a week or two, and that we we look into what we can do in our own countries and what we should have learned in school, and take it on ourselves to learn these things now as adults. You know, we're people who are here watching a booktube channel because we love reading, and if we could just move some of our reading across to be focused on educating ourselves on things we didn't learn at school, imagine how, think about the fact that now we're all learning more about certain forms of injustice and how angry it makes us. There is so many forms of injustice, and rage, whilst a difficult emotion to handle, can be fuelled into the good. It can be fuelled into righteous action and hope. And I think that with more knowledge, we could all use that for the good. So yeah, I hope this video has made some form of sense, and I hope you're all as safe and as well as you possibly can be, and I hope that we all continue to have these conversations and to check in with one another and to check ourselves, to really think about our reading and our actions and what we can do on a daily basis going forward to change some of the awful injustices in our world. So thanks for watching, and I will see you at some point, I assume, I'm not quite sure when, but at some point soon, and keep safe until then. Thanks, bye.